out there, folks? Hope you're all doing well. Welcome to the Tarmac Terrace Sim Racing channel. Here we are at Donington Park in Assetto Corsa Competizione for a quick race against the AI in the wet. Whilst I'm doing that, I want to talk to you about a little idea that I've had concerning, specifically, any simulator which allows you to race in both dry and wet conditions against AI or other people, but mainly the AI. Now, many modern simulators now have the ability to reproduce wet weather. I'm going to use three main examples in this video, those being Competizione itself, and Rfactor 2 by Studio 397, and also Automobilista 2 by Raceroom Studios. All of these simulators have fantastic weather simulation. I mean, look at this. The wet weather in Assetto Corsa Competizione is pretty stunning. The graphics are awesome. The physics feel great in wet weather, as they do also in Rfactor 2. Rfactor 2 looks even better in wet weather now than it used to, because earlier this year it had an update for its wet weather graphics. Also, Automobilista 2 has a wealth of weather and environment options. They even have changing foliage throughout the seasons. And you can also go to any track. If you take a car to a track one day and you want the actual real weather that's going on at that track on that day, you can have it. It's quite amazing. And having wet weather in a racing simulator, or the ability to change weather halfway through a race, is just amazing. It adds a whole new element to the racing, makes you think about your strategy when you're going to pit for wet tyres or pit for dry tyres if you start off in the pit for your dry tyres if it suddenly changes to dry. Little bit of a example of the fun that you could have in wet weather there as I locked up. So
clear on the left.
All of this is very well and good. You can set up a server with your mates. You can, if you've got something like Automobilista 2, where you can program several different weather slots, or Rfactor 2, you can set up a server and you can start racing with your mates. And in the beginning of the race it's dry, halfway through it starts to rain, later on it dries up again, and you follow that drying line around the track. It's fantastic. But there's a massive problem that affects quite a lot of sims, and I'm sure as I go through this video some of you will be able to relate to this. There's a massive problem when it comes to racing the AI in the wet, or rather in changing conditions. And what I'm going to call it is a calibration problem. What I mean is, if you take a simulator that can do wet or dry weather, and you go to a certain track, say Donington, with a certain car like a GT3, if you know how fast you are at that track, you know what your lap times are, you can set the AI to your desired skill level that will match, pretty much, if you put yourself in the middle of the pack, you can match the AI to your skill level and have a good, challenging race against them. However, if you then go back to that track and decide I want a wet race, so you set the weather to wet, and you've not changed the skill level of the AI at all, you start racing and suddenly find that the AI now in the wet are either a lot faster than you or a lot slower than you. And I mean, sometimes that extreme can be quite extreme. They could be a lot faster than you, or a lot slower. That's a bit of a problem. How can you solve that? Well, say your skill level slider in your simulation goes from, say, 50 at lowest to 120 at highest. If your skill level is 100, then in the dry, and you know the AI are slower in the wet, you can then change it to, say, 110 or 120, and now the AI are back at your skill level again, so that's fine. But what happens if you are really, really fast and you're already racing the AI at 120%? nothing you can do. If you're racing at 120% in the dry, and then you change to wet, you can't bump up the slider any further. And also, if your skill level is at 100, or whatever skill level it's at, it doesn't matter, you can't have a race with changing weather. Because you know that if you have a 30-minute race and you set the first half of the race to be dry and the next half of the race to be wet, you know that your race is pretty much over by the time you get 20 minutes through, because you will have overtaken the whole field as soon as you've all pitted for wet tyres, because the AI is going to slow right down. And within a few laps, you've passed them all. So your competition's out the window at that point. Now, the reason I'm driving around in Assetto Corsa Competizione here is because, for me personally, the AI, or the calibration between the AI's skill in the wet or the dry relative to yours is really, really good. I'm about as fast as the AI in the wet as I am in the dry with them. And that's at any track I choose to go to, and any car I choose to use in Assetto Corsa Competizione. I can set the AI to whatever my desired skill level is, and I can leave it there. No problem. But if I take something like Rfactor 2, for example, I generally find, and this is general, there is the odd exception, because there are quite a few different types of car in Rfactor 2 to choose from. I generally find that with most of the cars, the AI in the wet get a heck of a lot faster, to the point where as soon as it starts raining, my race is pretty much over, because they just start overtaking me like they've suddenly gained an extra 20 horsepower. So that's the problem. Automobilista 2 is a bit of a mixed bag. There are lots and lots of different types of car in Automobilista 2, and the AI with some of those cars are near enough-ish my skill level, either in the wet or the dry, but there's still a bit of a difference. But quite a lot of the time I'll find certain types of cars, so for instance the GTEs in Automobilista 2, I'm fine against them in the dry. I can set my skill level and have a good race with them in the dry. As soon as it starts to rain, suddenly their skill level just drops through the floor. And if I've got a race where it changes to wet weather, well, there's just no point, because as soon as it's raining and we're all on wet, I just start overtaking the whole field, and there's no challenge left there anymore. There are other cars in Automobilista 2 where they actually get much faster in the rain, and it's hard to keep up. That's a little bit more of a rarity, but it does happen. Now, this is a big problem, because all of this amazing weather and environment options, all of those options become rendered completely useless if you want to have an offline race against the AI, if they're suddenly going to change their speed and ability, whether it's wet or dry. And don't get me wrong, I'm not having a massive moan here, because it must be bloody hard to program AI for any sim in any condition, but even harder for the developers to figure out what speed they're going to have the AI drive at in the wet, because obviously different players are going to have different abilities in the wet. So for instance, if you like to race in the dry a lot, but occasionally like a race in the wet, you're probably going to be quite slow in the wet, because you're not used to it. However, you might be a bit of an Ayrton Senna and be an absolute god in the wet. So you want the AI to be reasonably fast in the wet. Or you might be like me and you're about the same in either condition relative to the AI. So, how do you solve that? In Automobilista 2, if you're prepared to go and muck about with Notepad, go into the program files, find the Custom AI files, you can muck about with the AI's rain ability, but only to a very small degree. So you can change the AI's rain ability from 0.0 to 1. And that's not a lot So for instance with the GTEs, even if you set it to 1, it just wouldn't cut it. They're still they're still massively slow in the wet. So obviously you kind of want the developer to do a good job of getting them to be a similar speed to you in the wet as they are in the dry as a basis. So for instance here in Competizione, Kunos I think have done it really, really well. There's a little bit of difference, but it's very, very marginal. But then again, as I said, there's players at different skill levels. So
You're halfway through, keep pushing.
what can you do? What can you do to solve this? Here's my idea, and I'd really love to hear your opinions on this. If you're a sim racer, especially if you might even know something about programming AI, maybe you might be able to tell me how hard or easy something like this would be to implement. How about... Oh, and by the way, before I go on any further, one of the reasons, and I could be wrong on this, let me know what you think, one of the reasons I think ACC does it so well is because, as far as I know, the AI cars use exactly the same physics as the player car. Whereas in Rfactor 2 and Automobilista 2, as far as I know, they don't. So the AI cars are on a simplified physics model or simplified tyre model. And we're really lagging behind here, but I don't care. I'm not interested in racing. I'm interested in talking to you guys. Oh, there we go. As I say, I'm not racing really well. There we go. One of the joys of wet weather there. An example of the excitement you can get from it. So, could that be the reason that the AI are pretty much the same skill level as you, whether you're in the wet or the dry, because of them being on the same tyre physics as you? I don't know. It's my hunch. And also, before I go any further, just a quick thank you to all of my subscribers. Thank you for your continued support to the channel. And I've been reading through some of your comments recently. I'm really enjoying hearing some of the points you've had to put across on recent videos. If you're new to the channel and you're enjoying this video, think about hitting that subscribe button, and you'll get updates on future videos. But coming back to this problem solution thing. So here's the idea. What if, as well as your... I'm going to carry on driving, I'm really lagging behind. What if, as well as your main skill slider, that goes from, say, 50 to 120, you then had a secondary slider for AI wet ability. And I'm not talking about another slider that goes from 50 to 120. I'm talking about a secondary slider linked to your main slider, which could then add or subtract 20% skill. So for instance, if you are really, really fast and you're at 120, you can't bump it up any higher. But if you've got that secondary wet weather skill level slider, you can take your 120 and then for the wet racing, for their wet ability, bump it up by 10, 15, 20% if you need to. And the reason I'm saying 20% sounds like a rather large margin compared to the 0.021% that you'll find in Automobilista 2's program files. I'm using a large margin there because there are some cars that are really slow in the rain in that sim, but also because of the fact that players have very varying abilities in the wet. What do you think of that idea? Now, I'd love to hear what you think of that in the comments. You could take the idea a little further, and I'm going to use, strangely enough, a sim that doesn't have any wet weather whatsoever as an example here. Raceroom. Raceroom has no wet weather, but it has a thing called adaptive AI, which is the more you race at any given track, it will kind of log your lap times and then adjust the AI or calibrate the AI to be at a similar speed to you. Wouldn't it be great if you could race around a track without even having to set any skill levels? You could go for a test day at a track, do a load of laps, and it would take your average speed and set the AI to similar lap times, and also then go back and do it in the wet, and it could log your wet ability. What do you think? I think that would be something useful for any sim that's got wet weather driving because of the variations in players' abilities. I'm going to leave you with an example so you can really see how bad this problem is. I'm going to leave you with an example from Automobilista 2 to show you the difference in speed between the AI in the dry and in the wet at the same skill level, the huge difference. I really would like to see this solved because having these weather options is great, but there's no point if the racing's poor. So, before I show you that example, I'm going to say thank you for watching. Thank you to all my subscribers. If you're not a subscriber and you're still here, obviously you're enjoying the video, think about hitting that subscribe button. You can then easily come back to this video if you want to reference it, and you'll get updates on future videos. Here are those examples from Automobilista 2. All the best. So here we go in the GTEs at Donington in Automobilista 2. AI are at 120 skill level and 50% aggression. I'm going to give the AI, as soon as the lights go green, I'm going to give the AI a 5-second start, and then over the course of 3 laps, I'm going to attempt to catch them up. Let's see what happens. So, lights are green. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And off we go. They're now going around the first corner. I'm going to drive as hard as I can. Within reason. Obviously I don't want to crash the car. I'm going to give it everything I've got in this moment. Good distance away from me. Now, will I catch up when everything bunches up around the 2 hairpins down here? Try to make sure I do clean laps, cut no corners, keep it fair, and we are indeed catching up a little as we all slow down from the hairpins and the cars bunch up. First lap, the AI in most sims will be kind of slow. We have caught them up. Let's see if it stays that way, because I'm expecting them now to get faster on their second lap, by the third lap even faster. Doing all right at the moment. And I've overcooked it slightly into the corner. Like I said, I am pushing. Deliberately so, just to show you guys that I'm not holding back at all. They got away from us again. Only the second lap. Double check that. Right, will I get a chance to catch them up again here? And yeah, we have caught them again a bit in the hairpins here, but they're a little bit further away than they were last time. Try and get a good exit. So, lap number 3, final lap. My last chance to catch them at 120% skill level in the dry. Still maintaining a good distance from me. A little bit of a slide again. I might be overly pushing it just for the purposes of this video. Chicane, close as I can on the curves, but not cutting it, not getting a track penalty. Reasonably good exit from the first chicane, first hairpin, sorry. Okay, that's lap number 3, and we have not caught up anyone. Okay. Let's try that test again now in the wet with exactly the same skill levels. Okay, here we go for our wet test. All settings the same skill level, 120%. Going to do the same thing, give the AI a 5-second head start and try and catch them up within 3 laps. The only thing that's changed is obviously we're now in the wet. Let's see how we get on. So we're at green. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay. And they're just rounding the first corner. I'm going to drive as hard as I can again, but it is wet, so I'm going to make sure I don't overcook it. And just after the crane of curves, I already feel like I'm closer to them. Much closer to them already. So close that I think I'm either going to catch them by the chicane or the first hairpin. Not quite by the chicane, okay, fair enough. But here's our first hairpin. And yeah, down the outside even. Okay, so we've already overtaken what looks like a couple of cars. Just by the first hairpin. Another one has gone on the outside there. Driving cleanly as well. Lap number 2 now. So this is the lap where they should start speeding up a little bit, but we're already on our way to overtaking this BMW. I think it is on the outside. All on the outside of the crane of curves. Had to duck out of that, but I'm able to take him back. Oh no, he's still there. Surprised. Happily surprised. But no. Did not expect him to brake quite so hard for the corner there. Oh, got a bit sideways, I've got a bit sideways. See, I told you I was pushing it. So let's see. Position 22, so we've overtaken 4 cars already. Oh, cars had a problem there in front. I just saw one of the cars run at the back of the other one. BMW's coming back. I'm going to go for the outside again. I had to slow down because I couldn't take the line I wanted to. Do that corner there. Right, now coming up for lap number 3. See what we can do with this. And for lap number 3, it looks like it's going to be easy. Too easy. Way too easy. And, yep. There's another car nearly out of the way. Out the way, nearly touched him but no contact. Nearly 2 cars out the way. And okay, we're rid of the yellow BMW there. So if this was a long race, eventually I'd just overtake all of these cars. They are at nowhere near the skill level they were in the dry. They've just completely dropped off, driving like grannies. And there you go, 18th place. So I've made 8 places by lap number 3 already. And if I carried on racing for any 15-20 minutes, I'd be in front of all of them. There's just no competition there. So there's the results of that test. If you want this channel to survive, do me a favor and hit subscribe. May seem like a small thing to do, but it enables me to make more videos for you. By hitting that button, you can help us thrive. Survive and keep this channel alive. Don't cost nothing, don't take no time. Come on now, keep this channel alive.